الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على عبد الله ورسوله نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. SubhanAllah, it's going to be a difficult last session to know what to include and what not to include. And I say last session because we have two sessions with a possible potential break in the middle, which might not happen. But let's see, inshallah. We're going to start with the Mu'tazila, and the reason that we have to speak about the Mu'tazila, in all honesty, is because of the fact that there's such a fundamental group for what is going to come later on. And so many were influenced by them and in opposition to them and so on. And also, if we talk about which came first, the Mu'tazila or the Jahmiyyah, actually the reality here is not to do with Jahm ibn Safwan himself, but what they call Dhuhur al-Jahmiyyah. When did people start to realize there was something called Jahmiyyah? Was after the Mu'tazila. And he was after that. So the first thing, the Mu'tazila were known before them, even though Jahm ibn Safwan might have preceded. The Mu'tazila got this name because they were a group of people who used to sit in the gatherings of, or there were people who used to sit in the gatherings of Al-Hasan al-Basri, and among them was as we're going to hear, Amr ibn Ubaid and Wasil ibn Ata. And Al-Hasan al-Basri, when they began to speak about Qadr and the issue, and before that they began to speak about Murtakib al-Kabira, what happens to the one who does the major sin. For when they showed their misguidance, Al-Hasan died 110 after the Hijrah, he said, "I'tazil anna," separate yourself from us. We don't want you sitting in our class. And they were known after that as the Mu'tazila. They actually, which is an interesting point, not all of the firaq like the names they are given. Some of them do and some of them don't. So not all of them support the names they're given. But the Mu'tazila is actually a group who themselves called themselves Mu'tazila. But they didn't take it from the statement of Al-Hasan al-Basri rahimahullah ta'ala, "I'tazil anna." Rather, they took it from وَأَعْتَزِلُكُمْ. وَأَعْتَزِلُكُمْ وَمَا تَدْعُونَ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ. I have separated myself from you and those that you worship besides Allah. And as though we have, in a praiseworthy way, we have become separate from these misguided individuals. Any meaning by that? The people who are upon the aqeedah of the Salaf. And they also brought a hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The hadith is mursal, da'if. "Man i'tazala min ash-sharri saqata fil khayr." Whoever separates himself and keeps away from evil is going to fall into good. The hadith is not authentic, but the point is that they praised themselves. And after the death of Al-Hasan al-Basri, these two individuals became known, who are Amr ibn Ubaid and Wasil ibn Ata, and those who followed them. As for Wasil ibn Ata, he died 138 after the Hijrah, and Amr ibn Ubaid died 143 after the Hijrah. And they were together, they were aqran. As Shaykh al-Islam said, rahimahullah ta'ala, إِنَّمَا كَانَ قَرِينَهُ. They were together. وقد روي أن واصلا تكلم مرة بكلام فقال عمرو بن عبيد لو بعث نبي ما كان يتكلم بأحسن من هذا. One day Wasil said something. And Wasil said something, and Amr said, if a prophet was sent, he would not have been able to say it better than that. And when what happened with them with regard to al-qadr and al-manzila, bayn al-manzilatayn, and Amr ibn Ubayd joined him in a part of that, and it started with Wasil ibn Ata, and Wasil was a person who was fasih al-lisan, very, very eloquent. Extremely eloquent. And his khutab, the way he would deliver his speeches, and very, very, very eloquent. And this fooled a lot of people. You can't ignore this as a reason why it fooled a lot of people. And we said the Mu'tazila, they were, people who were not known to be ignorant, not known to be riff-raff, rabble. They were known to be people educated. And in the beginning, they separated in two things. They separated in the matter of murtakib al-kabira. What do you do with the person who does a major sin? What did they say? في منزلة بين المنزلتين. He's neither a mu'min nor is he a kafir. And in the akhirah, he's in Jahannam forever. And so they go together with the Khawarij in being from the Wa'idiyah, the people who spoke about the one who does that. Effectively, the Wa'idiyah, what it means is Allah's punishment has to be carried out upon every single person who does that sin. That's why they're called Wa'idiyah. After that, what was the thing they came into? Qadr. They took the views of the Qadariyah and they actually began to really construct a discussion around them and promote them. And the issue of khalq af'al al-ibad, that was present at a very early stage. They have 5 usul that they are well known for in their aqeedah. We spoke about, for example, the 3 key points about the Asha'ira, for example, the issue of taqdeem al-aql ala al-naql, and khabr al-ahad, and fil i'tiqad, and all of those things. Ta'wil al-sifat. The Mu'tazila are known for 5 usul. And if we want to divide the Mu'tazila into 3 phases, we can. We can say that the beginning of the Mu'tazila is with the awail of the Qadariyah, the early deviancy in Qadr. We can say the second phase is the phase where they join with the Khawarij in the view regarding the person who does the major sin. As for the third phase, in the third phase, they begin to take many of the things that the Jahmiyyah took. And that's why before we talk about their usul al-khamsa, I think we have to talk about Jahm ibn Safwan. Because what you're going to see is that you actually can't talk about the Mu'tazila anymore now, apart from what we've said about Qadr and the person who does a major sin, we actually can't have any further discussion about the Mu'tazila without talking about the Jahmiyyah. The Jahmiyyah are the first group to deny Allah's names and attributes. And no doubt every single group that came after them that denied or twisted the meaning or tried to figuratively interpret Allah's names and attributes has a portion of what the Jahmiyyah were upon. But the true pure Jahmiyyah, we're talking about Jahm ibn Safwan, who took it from Jahm ibn Dirham. Jahm died 128 after the Hijrah and Jahm 124. Where did he take it from? He took it from Aban ibn Sam'an al-Yahudi. He took it from Aban ibn Sam'an, the Jew, who took it from Talut ibn Ukht al-Labid, who took it from Labid ibn al-A'sam as-Sahir, la'anahu Allah. And this came from the one who did sihr upon the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Silsilatun shaytaniyah. This is a silsila shaytaniyah. And understand that all those people who came after, from the Mu'tazila, from the Asha'ira and the Maturidiyya and the Kullabiyya and all of the others, all of them drank from the cup of Jahm ibn Safwan. Bila istithna. All of them did. It's just they didn't do what Jahm ibn Safwan did. They didn't go to that extent. Like all of them took from Jahm. So we honestly say to them, is this the silsila by which you protected your aqeedah? Is this where your aqeedah came from? From Jahm ibn Dirham, from Aban ibn Sam'an al-Yahudi, from Talut, from Labid ibn al-A'sam as-Sahir? Silsilatun shaytaniyah. There's another version of it because it's not agreed upon, and I don't mind if you don't take it, you don't have to. It's said, and that's what the ulama say about it. Like, and if you don't want to, we're not going to fight over it. If you don't like it, there are other versions. They say that Al-Ja'd took from the Sabi'ah. Al-Ja'd ibn Dirham took from the Sabi'ah. And it's also said that he took from the Majus. Ikhtilaf. But there's no ikhtilaf on at all. That Al-Ja'd ibn Dirham didn't take a single bit of it from the Sahaba. There is no khilaf on that. There is no khilaf that he didn't take any of it, neither from the Sahaba. The khilaf is, there are different views, and the scholars put forth different views. Some of them say, actually, he took it from because he lived in the Christian quarter among the Christians, and some of the Christians, they took it from some of the philosophers of some places, and they brought it into some language, and then he took it from them. One thing you can guarantee, he didn't take it from the Sahaba, nor did he take it from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, he said, أول من أنكر حقيقة محبة الله لعبده والعبد لربه في الإسلام هو الجعد بن درهم. He said, the first person to ever reject the idea that Allah loves his slaves and that the slaves love Allah. In Islam, no one said this before Al-Ja'd ibn Dirham. And he said, وَكَانَ الْجَعْدُ هَذَا أول من ظهر عنه التعطيل بإنكار صفات الله تعالى وإنكار محبته وتكليمه. Al-Ja'd was the first person to deny, to perform ta'atil, You know, when we say about Allah's names and attributes, we say that we believe in what Allah described himself with and what the Prophet ﷺ described himself with. And we say without, min ghayri ta'atilin, what else? Wala tamthil, wala takyifin, wala tahrifin, wala, naam. Tahrif is better. It's better to say tahrif than to say ta'wil, and it's better to say tamthil than to say tashbih. لكن على كل حال, the first one to deny ta'atil, what does it mean? Attala, yani he stripped the meaning away. Ar-Rahman is just a ra and a ha and a mim and a noon. As-salam is just a sin and a lam, a alif and a mim. That's it. It's just nothing else. There's no meaning. There's no reality to it. There's nothing. He denied that you can love Allah or that Allah loves the slave, and he denied that Allah spoke to his servants. And he's the first one in Islam to ever do this. Al-Ja'd ibn Dirham. And this was right at the beginning of the hundreds after the Hijrah that he started saying this. So you can put a date on it. He died, we said 120, what did we say? 124. In that last little period of his life. After the hundreds, that is when Al-Ja'd ibn Dirham came, the first ever one to do it. وَأَمَرَ عُلَمَاءُ الْإِسْلَامِ, Shaykh al-Islam said, كَالْحَسَنَ الْبَصْرِي وَغَيْرِهِ بِقَتْلِهِ. Hassan al-Basri commanded him to be killed as an apostate. Al-Ja'd was from the people of Harran. And Shaykh al-Islam says, كان الجعد ابن درهم من أهل حران, from the people of Harran. وكان فيهم بقايا من الصابئين والفلاسفة خصوم إبراهيم الخليل عليه السلام، فلهذا أنكر تكريم موسى وخلة إبراهيم موافقة لفرعون ونمرود بناء على أصل هؤلاء النفاة، وهو أن الرب تعالى لا يقوم به كلام ولا يقوم به محبة لغيره، فقتله المسلمون، ثم انتشرت مقالته في من ضل من هذا الوجه. Shaykh al-Islam, you read what he said, he just summarized everything for you. He said the first one who denied that Allah spoke, and the first one who denied that Allah has special love for some of his servants, was Al-Ja'd ibn Dirham. He said Al-Ja'd was from the people of Harran. And among the people of Harran, there were a remainder of the Sabi'in and the philosophers who debated with the people who fought with Ibrahim. And the people who were the descendants of those who fought with Ibrahim. For this reason, he denied that Allah spoke to Musa, and he denied that Allah took Ibrahim as a Khalil, and he agreed with Fir'aun and Numrud. Built upon the principle, what's the principle Al-Ja'd said? The principle is that Allah cannot be described with speech and cannot be described with love. He said the Muslims killed him. Then this statement of his spread out based upon that. الزهري said, ليس الجعدي من أمة محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. The one who follows Al-Ja'd ibn Dirham is not from the ummah of Muhammad صلى الله عليه وسلم. And Abu Hatim al-Razi said, أول من أتى بخلق القرآن جعد ibn Dirham. The first person to say the Quran was created was Ja'd ibn Dirham. And it was said about him, كان زنديقا. He was a heretic who sought to destroy Islam. Al-Imam Ahmad, rahimahullah ta'ala, tells a little more about what happened to Jahm. He said, what has reached us about the affair of Jahm, the enemy of Allah, is that he was from the people of Khurasan, from the people of Tirmidh. And he was a person who used to love to debate, صاحب خصومات وكلام. And he used to love debating, and he used to love logic and those type of things. وكان أكثر كلامه في الله تعالى. And most of his discussions and these arguments he would have would be about Allah. فلقي أناسا من المشركين يقال لهم السمنية. They're Hindus, by the way, or something like that. They are a group of Indian philosophers called the Sumaniya. He met with them. فعرفوا الجهم. They came to know Jahm. فقالوا له نكلمك. They say, we want to speak with you. فإن ظهرت حجتنا عليك دخلت في ديننا وإن ظهرت حجتك علينا دخلنا في دينك. They said, Jahm, we've got a proposal for you. Come here. We're going to debate with you. If we win the debate, you have to come to our religion. And if you win the debate, we'll come to your religion. فكان مما كلموا به الجهم أن قالوا له ألست تزعم أن لك إلها؟ قال الجهم نعم. They said to him, do you not claim that you have a God? Jahm said yes. قالوا له فهل رأيت إلهك? Have you seen your God? قال لا. قالوا هل سمعت كلامه? Have you heard him speak? قال لا. قالوا فشممت له رائحة? Have you smelt him? قال لا. قالوا فوجدت له حسا? Have you been able to sense him with any of your senses? Did you touch him? قال لا. قالوا فوجدت له مجسا؟ قال لا. قالوا فما يدريك أنه إله؟ So they brought these things. Did you tense him? Did you sense him? Has he got some kind of, has he got a place where he is? Has he got a form that you know of? So Jahm says no. قالوا فما يدريك أنه إله? How did you know he's a God? فتحير الجهم فلم يدري ما يعبد 40 يوما فبقي 40 يوما لا يعبد شيئا قاتل الله. What did Al-Jahm do? He left the religion for 40 days. Stopped praying. Said, I don't know what I worship. Based on that, have you seen your Lord? Have you heard your Lord? No. Okay, I don't know. I don't know what religion I am. Look at the worthlessness of this individual. What a lowly individual that someone just asks you 2-3 questions. Have you seen your Lord? No. And then you stop praying for 40 days. ثم لما خلا قلبه من معبود, when his heart had nothing left in it that he worshipped, Shaitan put his ideas into him. فقال إنه الوجود المطلق. He said, I know what I worship. I worship the absolute existence. And he basically, we're not going to get into the philosophical terms. I worship the thing whose only attribute is existence. وَنَفَى جَمِيعَ الصِّفَاتِ. And he left off all the sifat. He said Allah doesn't have any attributes at all. And he came to Al-Ja'd ibn Dirham and he took from him. We're not going to go into excessively the core argument that they built out of this, which is called Dalil al-A'rad wa Huduth al-Ajsam. It's called Dalil al-A'rad wa Huduth al-Ajsam. And this is how this so-called kind of rational, intellectual proof that you can prove by which Allah exists without needing to resort to the ayat. But the end result is what you need from the story that is mentioned from Imam Ahmad. You don't need anything else. That in the end, he said, 40 days, I don't think I worship anything. And then he said, I know what I worship. I worship the one who exists. He has no attribute other than existence. Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah ta'ala, he said something. He said, وَلَمْ يَكُنْ فِي الصَّحَابَةِ وَالتَّابِعِينَ أَحَدٌ يَسْتَدِلُّ عَلَى حُدُوثِ الْعَالَمِ بِحُدُوثِ الْأَجْسَامِ. He said there was not a single Sahabi nor a single Tabi'i who used the evidence of Huduth al-Ajsam, and Jahm, his evidence, his rational evidence, to prove the existence of Allah. He said, بل أول ما ظهر هذا الكلام في الإسلام بعد المئة الأولى من جهة الجعد بن درهم والجهم ibn Safwan. He said the people who brought this to the Ummah were al-Ja'd ibn Dirham and Jahm ibn Safwan. ثم صار إلى أصحاب عمر ibn عبيد كأبي الهذيل وأمثاله. He said then what happened was, this argument was taken on by who? Who took it on? Because let's be honest, Jahm ibn Safwan and Ja'd ibn Dirham are two people. They're just two nobodies. Who took it? The Mu'tazila. They didn't take everything he said. Like they came along and said, wow, this is it. Huduth al-Ajsam, this argument, this is it. Rational, philosophical proof that Allah exists, by which even the Hindu philosophers, the Indian philosophers can be defeated. This is what we need. Like, and what they did is, they cleaned it up a bit. They said, you, Jahm, you made a big mistake because you denied all of the attributes and you only affirmed one, whereas the correct thing is to deny all of them and only affirm three. So they went with almost the same thing, but they cleaned it up a bit, and they used their language and their scholarly sort of disposition, their kind of studious disposition, to actually package this up and present it to the people. This dalil in reality is min mabadi' al-falsafa al-Yunaniyya al-Wathaniyya. Where did it come from? It actually came from Greek philosophy. And that's why using these words like al-jism wal-ard wal-jawhar, like this, what do they call it? And the essence and the core and the purity and the bodies and accidents happening in bodies, and you can't even if I had 2 hours to you, I can't explain it to you. It's very complicated. It came into being when the falsafa of Yunan was translated at the time of Al-Ma'mun. Let's stop for a second and let's go to our list of the Abbasiyin. When is Al-Ma'mun? What age is that? So if we go through them, we have Al-Saffah, Al-Mansur, we have Al-Mihdi, we have Al-Hadi, Harun al-Rashid, Muhammad al-Amin, and al-Ma'mun. So al-Ma'mun was the son of Harun al-Rashid. And his Khilafah was between 198 to 218 after the Hijrah. So that's roughly, what are we saying? Roughly speaking, 190 to 100 years after Jahm ibn Safwan and Jahm ibn Dirham. But this is now coming into the real phase, the golden age for the Mu'tazila, and people actually start to take what was originally formed by the Jahmiyyah and bring it into the Mu'tazila. And the books of Greek philosophy are translated at the time of Al-Ma'mun, which is just at the turn of 200 after the Hijrah. Briefly, let's talk about what Jahm actually believed, very briefly. Number one, he believed that Iman was only al-ma'rifah and kufr is only al-jahl. That's the first of the beliefs of Jahm ibn Safwan. That Iman just means to know that there is a God. And of course, Jahm had experienced not having that Iman for 40 days. When he said, I don't know if there's a God anymore because I haven't seen him and I never thought about that. So I don't know if there's a God anymore. And kufr is not knowing that there's a God. And this is the worst of the views of the Murji'ah. And it is the worst of the views of the Murji'ah, and it is kufrun bila khilaf. No doubt about it. Because you are even taking the shahadatain away, and you didn't even leave them the shahadatain. You didn't leave them believing in anything about Allah. But it's consistent with what he believes. One thing you can give to him, it's consistent. Because he believes the only thing we know about Allah is that Allah exists, nothing else. The only thing that we know about Allah is that he exists. And therefore, for him, Iman is that knowledge. That's it. He believed that no one has any actions. Every action is Allah's action. He said, I believe every action is the action of Allah. And they're only called our actions. They're only termed as our actions, just majazan. Just min bab al-majaz. Only, like it's only just metaphorical speech that we say, the man left or sat down. In reality, everything is Allah. Yes, the belief of the Jabri. It's the most extreme of it. Rather, you reach the point and you see that I don't know, I don't have an adjective for it. You reach the point that you can't say that Allah is something, because if you say that Allah is something, you have made a resemblance between Allah and something. That's what he said. You can't say that Allah is something, because if you say that Allah is something, you've made a resemblance between him and something. He said that the knowledge of Allah is something muhdath, yani it's something that is new, it's not azali, it's not something that's always been, because he doesn't believe that knowledge is actually a sifa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The knowledge of Allah, to him, and I can't explain, but if you say like how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for example, created the Kaaba, as an example, or how created a person, and that's a new thing that happened, for him there's no difference between that and the knowledge of Allah. Because for him, you can't describe Allah with knowledge in the first place. And he used to say the Quran is created. If you're wondering if there are extreme contradictions in this, there are extreme contradictions. He actually said, in some cases, he said that the Quran has been changed. As in, it hasn't been preserved properly. Because he used to say that when people would argue against him with an ayah in the Quran, he was known to say, this ayah must have been just added to the Quran. For example, one person said to him, has Allah spoken? He said, no. He said, will he speak? He said, no. He said, in that case, who will say Yawm al-Qiyamah liman al-mulku al-yawm? Who will say to whom does the kingdom belong? And who will say Lillahi al-Wahid al-Qahhar? He said, people have added things to the Quran. He believed that Jannah and the fire will cease to exist. And other than that, if you are looking at that and thinking that there are contradictory beliefs in it, you would be completely right. Of course there are contradictory beliefs. You believe the Quran is created, but you don't believe Allah can create. You don't believe that creation is an attribute of Allah. Of course it's a contradiction. It doesn't make any sense. Like in the whole thing didn't make any sense. The argument of Dalil al-A'rad wa Huduth al-Ajsam didn't make any sense. Coming back to the Mu'tazila then and their usul al-Khamsa. The Mu'tazila and there's a lot of very philosophical discussion. I'm just trying to think about which ones we can put through. But for example, they would say that we believe that Allah has knowledge. They say Jahm made a mistake in that. Allah has knowledge. And we believe that Allah brings things into existence. We believe that Allah has always been. And when they say the word qadim is not a good word, but they mean He's always been there. We believe He has power, and we believe He's alive. But they brought 5 then. This principle, they call it Tawheed, and this is the first of their 5 principles. They call it At-Tawheed, but it's not the Tawheed of Tawheed. Any one of their famous the people who propagated what they believed is Al-Qadi Abdul Jabbar. Died 415 after the Hijrah. For where he came, he said that Tawheed is to believe that only Allah has His sifat, and to deny from Allah what deserves to be denied, and affirm what affirms to be believed. And he said that this is that Allah Azza wa Jal has knowledge. Naam. And so on. The second principle they have is called al-adl. They call it justice. And this is what they mean by justice, is to discuss what is appropriate about Allah and what is not appropriate. It comes within the same issues that we talked about in Tawheed, but it's more to do with Allah's actions. What actions are appropriate and what actions are not appropriate. And they agreed with the Qadariyah, as we said. Their third principle is called al-wa'd wal-wa'id. And this is their issue of being from the Wa'idiyah, the people who believe that the person who does the major sin will be in the fire, and that the Wa'id has to be carried out upon them. And everyone who does it has to get the punishment. There is no forgiveness. The fourth one they had is al-manzila bayn al-manzilatayn, that the person who commits a major sin in this life is neither a believer nor a disbeliever. And the fifth one is the one they call al-amr bil-ma'ruf wal-nahi an al-munkar. And this also has nothing to do with al-amr bil-ma'ruf wal-nahi an al-munkar, but it has to do with the previous issues. For example, their statement, there is no difference between waging war against the kafir and waging war against the fasiq. When did the Mu'tazila really start to show? The beginning of it in the time of Harun al-Rashid. Harun al-Rashid was perhaps the best of the Khulafa of Bani Abbas, was Harun al-Rashid. However, Harun al-Rashid did bring some of the figures of the Mu'tazila, but he wasn't one of them. He wasn't upon their madhab, lakin he used to listen. These are people of fasaha, language, evidences to a certain extent. But his son Abdullah al-Ma'mun, who died 218 after the Hijrah, used to consider himself a scholar of the Mu'tazila. So he brought them near. Ibn al-Qayyim said, غَلَبَ عَلَى مَجْلِسِهِ جَمَاعَةٌ مِنَ الْجَهْمِيَّةِ مِمَّا كَانَ أَبُوهُ الرَّشِيدُ قَدْ أَقْصَاهُمْ وَتَبِعَهُمْ بِالْحَبْسِ وَالْقَتْلِ. He said, in his majlis, his gathering, his sitting, al-Ma'mun, was a group of the Jahmiyyah. Why is he calling them Jahmiyyah? Because now he's using the word Jahmiyyah now for the Mu'tazila. And these are the people who are now denying the names and attributes of Allah. That his father, Harun al-Rashid, had imprisoned some of them and killed some of them, but he brought those people close to him. So they brought the bid'ah of tajahhum in his ear and in his heart. He accepted it, he considered it to be something good, and he called the people to it, and he punished the people who did not accept it. And the length of his life was not long. Afterwards it came to Al-Mu'tasim. He's the one who beat Ahmad ibn Hanbal. He's the one who tortured Ahmad ibn Hanbal. So Al-Ma'mun started it off, then it went on like that, Al-Mu'tasim and so on. From the figures that you should know about here are Bishr al-Marisi, very famous, died 218 after the Hijrah, Shaykh al-Mu'tazila, Bishr ibn Ghiyath, bin Abi Karima al-Adawi, al-Baghdadi, al-Marisi. His father was a Jew. He wrote a book in Tawheed and a book regarding Al-Irja, a book refuting the Khawarij, and some other topics on that. He took fiqh originally from Al-Qadi Abi Yusuf, the student of Abu Hanifa. Then it began a matter of ilm al-kalam. The matter of ilm al-kalam came into him, rhetoric and philosophy and so on. And he took that and it overcame him, and he called the people to testify that the Quran is created. until he became one of the core of the Jahmiyyah. And a number of them considered him to be a kafir, even though he had never met Jahm ibn Safwan, but he had taken the views from the students of Jahm, and he died 218 after the Hijrah. And from those who declared him to be a kafir was Sufyan ibn Uyayna and Abdullah ibn Mubarak and a group of A'immat al-Salaf. As for if we were to summarize Bishr and what he believed, so first of all we can say his belief that Iman is only at tasdeeq. So in this, the belief of the Murji'ah. The second point we can point out is the belief in that the Quran is created. The belief that Imam Ahmad suffered for and was tortured for. And if you read the biography of Imam Ahmad, it's present in the English language. If you read the biography of Imam Ahmad, well, you'll see what he suffered because of this. Because when they tortured, you remember now the Khalifa is from the Mu'tazila. And he's bringing people with his army, with his sulta, with his power, and he's torturing people until they admit or until they are forced to say that the Quran is created. And they said everybody gave up. Everyone. Because, and that was, by the way, not necessarily forbidden. Yani you're in danger of your life. He would whip people, he would kill people. So people gave up. They said in the end only 2 people stayed firm in saying that the Quran is the speech of Allah, it's not created. And that was Ahmad ibn Hanbal, rahimahullah ta'ala, and a man who I remember his name was Muhammad ibn Nuh, if I remember his name correctly. And they were the only 2. And as for Muhammad ibn Nuh, he was not a famous man with a big following. Like he refused to say that the Quran was created. As for Imam Ahmad, they made him suffer greatly for it. But he would not stop. And it said that even after they tortured him, the Khalifa would bring his men to debate with Imam Ahmad. And they said even after he would be tortured, he wouldn't make a mistake in his bringing ayat and ahadith. Imagine that you're having a debate, and in between the debate, they torture you. And during the debate, when you're debating with them, they torture you. And then again you come back and the men come back. They said they debated him, sometimes for hours upon hours. And there is times when he wouldn't have not even a drop of water to drink. And he would keep on, and they said we never saw him slip. We never saw his tongue slip in bringing the ayat and the ahadith, defending that the Quran is the speech of Allah and it's uncreated. They denied the sifat of Allah Azza wa Jal. And from here comes the famous thing that you hear them say, Sami'un bila sam' basirun bila basar. That he is as-sami' but he cannot hear. And he is al-basir but he cannot see. They came with some other strange things like making sujood to the sun is not kufr, but it's a sign of kufr. From them, and again one that was a famous one from the time of Imam Ahmad, was a man named Ahmad ibn Abi Du'ad. He died 240 after the Hijrah. He accompanied some of the students of Wasil ibn Ata. And he was Ahmad ibn Abi Du'ad ibn Jarir al-Qadi al-Basri. He became the chief judge for Al-Mu'tasim and Al-Wathiq after him. and some of the days of Al-Mutawakkil. الدارقطني said هو الذي يمتحن العلماء في أيامه ويدعوهم إلى خلق القرآن. He was the one who tortured the scholars during his time, and he called them and forced them to admit to, or he forced them to say that the Quran is created. Amanas al Imam Ahmad, the one who says the Quran is created, what do you say about him? قال كافر. He said he's a disbeliever. قال قلت فابن أبي دؤاد. He said, what about Ibn Abi Du'ad? قال كافر بالله العظيم. قال قلت بماذا كفر. He said, what did he disbelieve by? Or what did he disbelieve in? قال كفر بكتاب الله تعالى. And then he gave one of his evidence. He gave many evidences. Like from the evidences he gave, he said the statement of Allah Azza wa Jal, وَلَئِنِ اتَّبَعْتَ أَهْوَاءَهُمْ بَعْدَ الَّذِي جَاءَكَ مِنَ الْعِلْمِ. He said that Allah describes the Quran as the knowledge of Allah, and whoever says the knowledge of Allah is created is a kafir. Now bear in mind here that the Mu'tazila were also doing something else which is very important for us to understand and to know. And that is that some of Ahlul Bid'ah refute others. And this can be a reason why their bid'ah can sometimes be accepted by people and can sometimes spread. So for example, the Mu'tazila were refuting the philosophers. And they were doing that in the court of the Khalifa to show that they had their knowledge and the evidences with them, and there would be philosophers and people of different paths and religions and whatever, and they would each present their arguments, and the Mu'tazila would refute them. And because of those refutations, some people took on board what they said. That's not unusual. Actually, a lot of the best discussion about the Mu'tazila and what they believe, some of it is in the books of the Asha'ira. And actually there are some early books on different religions and different firaq which were written by the Asha'ira. Abu al-Hasan has one, and also Shahristani has one. All of them from the Asha'ira. So you shouldn't be surprised, and until today, maybe somebody writes a refutation of the Shia or whatever, and people see it to be something good, and they lean towards them, but they don't see the reality of what that person themselves actually believes. Here it would be useful for us to come to the topic of ilmul kalam. What is ilmul kalam? One of the best definitions, I think, and the easiest, is the definition of Ibn Khaldun, died 880 after the Hijrah. هو علم يتضمن الحجاج عن العقائد الإيمانية بالأدلة العقلية والرد على المبتدعة المنحرفين في الاعتقادات عن مذهب السلف وأهل السنة. طبعا عشري definition, لكن it tells you what they think it is. It is a knowledge which is used to establish proof in Aqidah and Iman. It is a knowledge which is used to establish proof in Aqidah and Iman, using intellectual, rational, logical evidences, and by which we refute the innovators who have left the madhab of the Salaf and Ahlul Sunnah. In reality, these are also innovators who left the madhab of Ahlul Sunnah as well. But this is what it's good because this is a very nice summary of what they actually believe it to be. No problem, inshallah. It's a knowledge which encompasses, I don't know exactly how I did last time, like evidences for Aqidah and Iman which are proven by the intellect, بالأدلة العقلية. And refuting the مبتدعة المنحرفين في الاعتقادات عن مذهب السلف وأهل السنة. Al-Ghazali says about it, about ilm al-kalam. Died 505 after the Hijrah. He says this in Ihya Ulum al-Din. He said, وَبَعْضُهَا خَوْضٌ فِيمَا لَا يَتَعَلَّقُ بِالدِّينِ. He said some of it is getting involved in things that have nothing to do with the religion. وَلَمْ يَكُنْ شَيْءٌ مِّنْهُ مَأْلُوفًا فِي الْعَصْرِ الْأَوَّلِ وَكَانَ الْخَوْضُ فِيهِ بِالْكُلِّيَّةِ مِنَ الْبِدْعَةِ. This is Al-Ghazali, Al-Mutakallim, Al-Ghazali who is who he is. And Al-Ghazali says it involves getting involved in things that have got nothing to do with the religion. None of it was known in the early times. And getting involved in it completely is bid'ah. Then he says, I'm not going to have time to repeat again and again. He said, لكن تغير الآن حكمه إذ حدثت البدعة الصارفة عن مقتضى القرآن والسنة فصار ذلك المحظور بحكم الضرورة مأذوذا فيه بل صار من فروض الكفايات. So then Al-Ghazali is justifying why he at that point was a mutakallim. He repented after that. Why at that point he was into ilm al-kalam. He said it's bid'ah and it involves that which is nothing from the deen and it was never known by the salaf, but it's a darura because we don't find any other way to be able to respond to the people. Because so much bid'ah has come out now, we don't find a way to respond to that bid'ah except through it. And that's very sad. He then tells you it's fardu kifaya. And he says then that it's a fardu kifaya. Like in the reality is what he's saying. He's just expressing his own lack of ability. I personally don't know how to refute people from bid'ah from the Quran and Sunnah, so I see it as a darura that we have to study this knowledge which never existed among the Sahaba. Some of them said, إِنَّمَا سُمِّيَ هَؤُلَاءِ أَهْلُ الْكَلَامِ لِأَنَّهُمْ لَمْ يُفِيدُوا عِلْمًا لم يكن معروفا وإنما أتوا بزيادة كلام قد لا يفيد. Some people said it's called ilm al-kalam because all they do is talk. And they don't bring anything beneficial at all except just extra words that people already knew. Nuh al-Jami' narrates from Abi Hanifa, rahimahullah ta'ala, that he said, what do you say about what people say about al-kalam fil a'radi wal ajsam? About the intellectual proofs used by Jahm ibn Safwan. Abu Hanifa replied, مقالات الفلاسفة عليك بالأثر وطريقة السلف. He said, these are the views of the philosophers. Stick to the hadith and the way of the salaf. وَإِيَّاكَ وَكُلَّ مُحْدَثَةٍ فَإِنَّهَا بِدْعَةٍ. Keep away from every newly invented matter, for it's a bid'ah. Abu Yusuf said, the student of Abu Hanifa, الْعِلْمُ بِالْكَلَامِ جَهْلٌ وَمَنْ طَلَبَ الْعِلْمَ بِهِ تَزَنْدَقٍ. He said, knowledge of ilm al-kalam is ignorance, and whoever seeks knowledge through it becomes a heretic. As for the Malikiyah, Ibn Khuwais from the Malikiyah 390 after the Hijrah, he said, the people of desires according to Malik and all of our companions from the Malikiyah, they are Ahlul Kalam. فكل متكلم فهو من أهل الأهواء والبدع أشعريا كان أو غير أشعري ولا تقبل له شهادة في الإسلام أبدا ويهجر ويؤدب على بدعته فإن تمادى عليها استتيب منها. He said the view of the Malik and all of the companions of Malik is that the people of desires are the people of Kalam. Every person of Kalam is from the people of desires and innovation, whether an Ash'ari or a non-Ash'ari. We don't accept his witness in Islam ever. We abandon him and he is to be disciplined and chastised for his bid'ah, and if he continues in it, then he is to be forced through punishment, that he's been forced to repent. And Ash-Shafi'i said, حكمي في أهل الكلام أن يضربوا بالجريد والنعال ويطاف بهم في العشائر والقبائل يقال هذا جزاء من ترك الكتاب والسنة وأقبل على علم الكلام. He said, my ruling regarding the people of Kalam is that they should be beaten with the palm, fiber, and the sandals, and they should be paraded around the towns and the villages, and it would be said, this is the punishment for the one who leaves the Quran and the Sunnah and takes ilm al-kalam. Al-Imam Ahmad said, لا يفلح صاحب كلام أبدا. A person of kalam will never ever benefit. Rather, Al-Ghazali himself forbade the general people from it and repented from it, as did also Al-Razi, who was a big mutakallim from the Asha'ira. He also repented from it. He said, لقد تأملت الكتب الكلامية والمناهج الفلسفية فما رأيتها تشفي عليلا ولا تروي غليلا ورأيت أقرب الطرق طريقة القرآن أقرأ في الإثبات الرحمن على العرش استوى وإليه يصعد الكلم الطيب والعمل الصالح يرفعه وأقرأ في النفي ليس كمثله شيء ولا يحيطون به علما ومن جرب مثل تجربتي عرف مثل معرفتي. Al-Razi, Al-Mutakallim, Al-Ash'ari, listen what he said at the end of his life. I've been through the books of Kalam and the ways of the philosophers, and I found that it does not quench the thirst. It doesn't cure the sick and it doesn't quench the thirst of the thirsty. And I found the best of the ways is the way of the Quran. To read Ar-Rahmanu ala al-Arsh istawa. And he mentioned another ayah. And he said to read Laysa kamithlihi shay'un. And I found, and whoever tries what I tried will come to know what I have come to know. And he repented from it. Like, the question is, did he really repent from it? A lot of them, the reality is that they repented as best they could, but they didn't repent and come to the Sunnah. What they did is they went to at-tafweed. They went to the issue of just saying that we don't know what the ayahs mean and we just read the ayah as it is. But they were trying to repent. Al-Ghazali, rahimahullah, he tried to repent 4 times in his life. He started off with the Batiniyah, and then the Falasifa, and then the Mutakallimin, and then the Sufiyah. And he was trying to come to the truth, and he was leaving a worse one and going to another one, and then leaving it and going to another one, and then he left it and went to another one, and each time he blamed himself for what he did before. Al-Juwayni, Imam al-Haramain, Al-Ash'ari, the same thing. At the end of his life he made tawbah. Lakin did he really come to the Sunnah? Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari before them, end of his life made tawbah. All of them realized there is nothing good in ilm al-kalam. But they didn't come to the Sunnah completely. Rather what they did is they And they got part of the sunnah and they missed part, and many of them went to become from the Mufawwidah, the people of Tafweed. And that's why really the only way that the Asha'ira really get out of it, to be honest with you, is just by that. They say, yeah, but because the two madhabs are correct. It's correct to say nobody knows what it means except Allah, and it's correct to say that it doesn't mean what it says. It's correct to interpret it, and it's correct to just say no one knows except Allah. Like Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala, and he was from those who clarified that the second view that they came to was worse than the first. Because if you believe that no one knows what it means, that must mean that you also believe the Prophet ﷺ didn't know what it meant, and that the Sahaba didn't know what it meant, and that Allah sent down a Quran which the majority of it, nobody knows what it means. But it's actually worse than the other belief. Like, they were trying to get out of what they got themselves into. Abu al-Hasan was better than the others. Likewise Al-Juwayni and Al-Razi and Al-Ghazali. All of them trying to get out of what they got themselves into. Because ultimately, if you talk about being Shafi'i, and this is the Shafi'i madhab and all of that, like Imam al-Shafi'i hated it. Imam al-Shafi'i hated it. وَالْعِلْمُ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ. We're going to stop for a small break. We're going to take 10-minute break, inshallah ta'ala. Thing is, Shaykh Hudayfa said I have to take 10-minute break. He said 15, but there's a reason for it. There's usually a reason. If they say you have to do it, there's a reason for it, inshallah. We'll come back, inshallah ta'ala. We're going to speak about the Kullabiyya. Briefly, we're going to speak about the Asha'ira and the Maturidiyya. We're going to speak about the Sufiyya, inshallah ta'ala. But it's very quick. It's best what we can do. I've got it in the full details. AMAU is there with like a large amount of lessons for each one. But at least we can try to summarize it, inshallah ta'ala. هذا والله أعلم والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. الحمد لله رب العالمين وبه نستعين الصلاة والسلام على عبد الله ورسوله نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ما بعد. Inshallah ta'ala, what we're going to try to do now is we have our last session. We just have an hour, that's all we have. And قدر الله وما شاء فعل. I also don't have time afterwards either. I have a train that is going straight away after Isha. In fact, it's like touch and go whether I'll be even to manage to catch Isha before it. However, I want to try to go through a very brief discussion of the mutakallimin after the Mu'tazila. So we know by the mutakallimin we mean the people of ilm al-kalam. And we know that the first people really to start the awail, I like to use that word, the people who are not really part of it, but they just kind of drop the seeds, Jahm ibn Safwan and Jahm ibn Dirham, the philosophers. But really the Mu'tazila in the time of Al-Ma'mun are really where this starts to take hold. Because to be honest with you, it wasn't really a formed idea before that, you can say. Sahih, there's no doubt Jahm brought it in his Dalil al-A'rad wa Huduth al-Ajsam, and people took what Jahm said and kind of modified it and modernized it. But it was really the Mu'tazila in the time of Al-Ma'mun, slightly in the time of Harun al-Rashid, but definitely in the time of Al-Ma'mun, where they really started to push this idea of proving Islamic Aqeedah, not from the Quran and not from the Sunnah, but proving the Islamic Aqeedah from Al-Aql, from the point of rationality, and using philosophical principles to be able to bring out the knowledge needed to replace the role of the ayat and the ahadith in proving the Islamic Aqeedah. Or to supplement. If we don't say replace, might be a bit harsh, that came later on. To supplement, if we're being generous. The first group we want to talk about is the Kullabiyah. And why I want to talk about the Kullabiyah to you is because I really want you to understand that the Asha'ira of today are nothing like the Asha'ira of the past. The Asha'ira of the past would not recognize Al-Madhhab al-Ash'ari today. The Kullabiyah appeared at the beginning of the third Al-Qarn al-Thalith al-Hijri, from a man called Abdullah ibn Sa'id al-Qattan al-Basri, known as Ibn Kullab. He was a man of religion and a man who refuted the Mu'tazila, he refuted the philosophers, he defended Ahlus Sunnah and their Aqeedah. But how did he do it? What did he use? Ilm al-Kalam. You guys with me so far? And he's defending Ahlus Sunnah. He's refuting the Mu'tazila. When we say Ahlus Sunnah now, we mean, because when you hear them talk about Ahlus Sunnah here, if an Ash'ari talks about the Mu'tazila and Ahlus Sunnah, he means the Mu'tazila and those opposed to them. He's refuting the Mu'tazila. He's refuting the philosophers. Except that he's refuting the Jahmiyyah, except that he did accept one or two of the points that they raised. And that's the danger really with ilm al-kalam, that one of the great dangers with ilm al-kalam is when you get into this philosophical discussion, you might even be willing to say to someone, yeah, okay, I agree with you on that. Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah said, Ibn Kullab qawluhu مشوب بقول الجهمية وهو مركب بين قول أهل السنة وقول الجهمية. He said Ibn Kullab's views were tainted by the Jahmiyyah. It was a combination of something that was, he took the views of Ahl Sunnah and he took the views of the Jahmiyyah. And Shaykh al-Islam said, Ibn Kullab, Imam al-Ash'ariyah, أكثر مخالفة لجهم وأقرب إلى السلف من الأشعري نفسه. Allahu Akbar. He said, Ibn Kullab, the Imam of the Ash'aris. Why is he called the Imam of the Ash'ari? He came before Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari. They said, Ibn Kullab was the Imam of the Ash'aris that was the most against the Jahmiyyah. So the Ash'aris, if you look at them, the Ash'aris, the furthest away from Jahm ibn Safwan was Ibn Kullab. And he was the closest to the Salaf. In fact, Ibn Taymiyyah says he was closer to the Salaf than Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari was. And he was closer to the Salaf than Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari. What was the beliefs of Ibn Kullab? Affirming the Asma wa Sifat. Okay, that's a good start. Except al-ikhtiyariyah, the ones that were done by Allah's will and choice. He was the first person to separate that issue. So until then, you were either Mu'tazila or you were either Ahl Sunnah. Ahl Sunnah affirm all the Asma wa Sifat, and the Mu'tazila only affirm a handful of them. We heard about the 5 that they spoke about, Tawheed and all of that. He comes along and brings something new. He says, no. To defend Ahl Sunnah, we affirm all of the Asma wa Sifat, but we don't affirm those that are done by Allah's will. In other words, those that are done whenever Allah wants. So there are things that Allah Azza wa Jal does whenever He wants. For example, al-istiwa, rising over the throne. When Allah wants to rise over the throne, and He does it. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to descend, He does it. That is Allah's choice. Fa'alun lima yurid. He does whatever He wants. This is what Ibn Kullab exempted. He was the first person to make this distinction. He was the first person to say that the speech of Allah, because here they have an issue. Their issue is the speech of Allah. Okay, the speech of Allah, you would think they would deny it, right? Because it's also min as-sifat al-ikhtiyariyah. And Allah speaks when He wants and says what He wants to who He wants. And that's fa'alun lima yurid. Allah does whatever He wills. He said, no, we believe, because Allah said about His kalam, and we are people who take the Quran and the Sunnah, so we believe in the kalam of Allah, but we believe that Allah's speech is something that is within Himself, and it's not something that can be said whenever Allah wants, or something that can be heard, or something that can be, I don't know if I can explain it very well. And they say qa'imun bidhat. And it's within Allah. It's not something external that can be heard. You can't hear the speech of Allah according to Ibn Kullab. And it's not something which is done when Allah wants. Like Allah spoke to this person or spoke to this person. So the only way I can explain it is like a constant tone. Obviously, they're not comparing Allah to His creation. I'm just explaining to you the concept of what He's saying. You know, a constant tone, like just a dead, you know, like when you call someone, you get a dead number, you just get a constant. It doesn't stop, it doesn't go up, it doesn't go down, it is just a constant attribute within Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's what the speech of Allah is. He said Allah can be seen in the akhirah. we're going to contrast this with the beliefs of others. And he believes that the actions of the servants are created by Allah. And here's where kind of the Jabriya starts, kasbun min al-abd, and you have like the servant has a kasb in it, but it's kind of starting to lean towards the Jabriya. And the belief that Iman is only tasdeeq. Iman is only belief, which as well as tasdeeq and as well as professing on the tongue. La yazid wa la yanqus, and the belief of the lightest of the murji'ah. Al-Muhasibi took from him, 243 after the Hijrah. Dawood al-Zahiri, Muassis of the Madhab Zahiriyah, took from him 270 after the Hijrah. And Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari, who died 324 after the Hijrah. This now brings us to the Asha'ira. In the beginning, Abu al-Hasan, who is Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari al-Basri, who died 324 after the Hijrah, he went through 3 phases in his life. Ibn Kathir, he says, rahimahullah ta'ala, فذكروا للشيخ أبي الحسن العشعري 3 أحوال. 3 phases. أولها حال الاعتزال التي رجع عنها لا محالة. In the beginning, he was a staunch Mu'tazili, from the Mu'tazila. And he studied from Abu Ali al-Jubai, the Shaykh of the Mu'tazila. And actually, al-Jubai was his stepfather. He studied the fiqh of Abi Hanifa, and he studied the madhab of the Mu'tazila for 40 years. Now that honestly starts, and I do believe this is fair, and I don't get me wrong, Abu al-Hasan rahimahullah ta'ala repented, and he came back to the sunnah, and may Allah Azza wa Jal forgive him for that mistake that he had, and forgive us. Lekin, I want to say something. Do you think that someone who spent 40 years as a Mu'tazili Jahmi is an Imam in Aqeedah? It's worth saying, right? Honestly, even the Asha'ira, because Asha'ira, if they are listening to this, they also believe the Mu'tazila are absolutely misguided individuals. Lekin your Imam spent 40 years as a Mu'tazili. Don't you think that says something about a lack of rusukh, a lack of firmness in the Aqeedah? That's what we're saying. You look at these people, and wallahi, the more you look into it, the more the story falls apart. I don't care if they're Mu'adham al-Ummah and the great scholars of all, you want to say what you want. Like in your Imam, the Mu'assisul Madhab, I don't know what people used to believe for the first 300 years. Anyway, 324 years after the Hijrah he died. Let's say 250 years the people are upon Aqidat al-Salaf, or they're Mu'tazila, and then the Asha'ira come along. But 40 years as a Mu'tazili. In that 40 years you didn't stop 1 minute to think that this is evil and misguidance. And the second phase, إثبات الصفات العقلية السبع. So he came and he affirmed 7 attributes. So he added to the Mu'tazila, he affirmed 7. What are the 7 attributes that Asha'ira affirm? Al-Haya, that Allah is alive. Al-Ilm, that Allah has knowledge. Al-Qudra, that Allah has power. Al-Irada, Do the Mu'tazila affirm al-irada? No, the Mu'tazila don't. They have ikhtilaf shadid among them. Some of them do and some of them don't. They have a very strong ikhtilaf on them on the word irada. As-sam', al-basar, and al-kalam. But the kalam is kalam dhati. It's the view of Ibn Kullab, right? It's kalam dhati. And it's the kalam that is the constant with Allah. It can't be heard and it can't be. طيب, what about all of the other sifat? Madhab Abu al-Hasan in his second phase of his life is at-ta'wil. That means to interpret them with a different meaning to the apparent meaning. Like al-wajh, the face, al-yadayn, the two hands, al-qadam, al-saq, the shin, and others. In his second phase, whose madhab was he upon? Ibn Kullab. So he left, after 40 years, he left the Mu'tazila, and he was heavily influenced by Ibn Kullab, and he took the madhab of Ibn Kullab, and that is his madhab in the second phase of his life. And he's one of the Kullabiyah. In reality, honestly, there isn't something called Ash'ari at this point. Not in the life of Abu al-Hasan is there something called Ash'ari. What there is the Kullabiyah, and that's it. He's just one of the Kullabiyah in the second phase of his life. In the third phase of his life, rahimahullah ta'ala, he left all of that and he came back to the madhab of the Salaf in the best way that he could. And he wrote his book, Al-Ibana, that was the last of his works. He wrote that book, rahimahullah ta'ala, clarifying that he had left the way of Ibn Kullab and embraced the way of the Salaf. The reality is that you have to be honest and say, when you're going to hear all these people who, and he repented and so on, you have to be honest and say that they did repent and they tried, but at the same time they didn't get it right. And even Abu al-Hasan in Al-Ibana, it was closer to the madhab of the Salaf, no doubt. And we'll have to take the question at the end. It was closer to the madhab of the Salaf, no doubt. There were 3 books that he wrote after his tawbah. رسالة إلى أهل الثغر, الإبانة في أصول الديانة, and اختلاف المصلين. And they actually say he wrote more, he spoke more after he came back to the Aqeedah of the Salaf than he did when he was upon the madhab of Ibn Kullab. We now want to talk about the phases of the Ash'ariyah. And the first thing we're going to quote is a statement of Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala. He said, Al-Ash'ariyu wa amthaluhu barzakhun bayna as-salaf wal-jahmiyya akhadhu min ha'ula'i kalaman sahihan wa min ha'ula'i usulan aqliyan dhannuha sahihatan wa hiya fasidah. فمن الناس من مال إليه من جهة السلفية ومن الناس من مال إليه من جهة البدعية الجهمية كأبي المعالي وأتباعه ومنهم من سلك مسلكهم كأئمة أصحابهم. Ibn Taymiyyah is very just and balanced. He said Al-Ash'ari and the likes of him are a barzakh. They're a land between the Salaf and the Jahmiyyah. So they're not the extreme of the Jahmiyyah, nor are they upon the madhab of the Salaf, but they are a barzakh. They're the people in between. He said they took from the Salaf true speech, and they took from the Jahmiyyah false principles that they thought were correct. And wallah, rahimahullah ta'ala rahmatan wasi'an, Shaykh al-Islam, very honest. He said, look, I believe that when they took these principles from the Jahmiyyah, they truly believed, honestly, that they were taking valid principles by which they could defend the Sunnah and defend Islam. But they didn't realize that the principles they took were actually evil, false principles that had a lot of negatives, but they just didn't see the negatives in them. Then he said something. He said, so the people who are Ash'ari, some of them lean towards Salafiyah, and other of them lean towards the Jahmiyyah, like Abil Ma'ali al-Juwayni and his followers. And there were some who completely followed the way of the Jahmiyyah. And that's him being honest. And Shaykh Islam doesn't say, you are all Jahmiyyah. And he's saying, the Ash'aris sit in a place between the Salafis and the Jahmiyyah. And you will find Ash'aris who are leaning in the direction of Salafiyah, and you'll find Ash'aris that are leaning in the direction of the Jahmiyyah, and you'll see some of them who are Jahmiyyah. Finished. You'll see. They say in these phases, there were 3 or 4 distinct phases. One of our mashayikh said, Hafidhahullah ta'ala, in each phase, they changed 25% of what Abu al-Hasan was upon from the madhab of Ibn Kullab, not from the madhab of the Salaf. So Abu al-Hasan in phase 2 is Kullabi, right? He's upon the madhab of Ibn Kullab. You guys with me? Abu al-Hasan, phase 2 of his life, he's upon the madhab of Ibn Kullab. Al-Asha'ira, they go through phases, and in these phases, each phase takes 25% of what Ibn Kullab believed and changes it. And then again 25% and changes it, and again 25% and changes it, and each one of them has a'imma. So in the beginning, we're going to call the phase of them being Kullabiyah, the Kullabi phase, where they're not actually really distinct from the Kullabiyah. And this is the phase of Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari. The first major personality of the Asha'ira is Al-Qadi Abi Bakr al-Baqillani, who died 403 after the Hijrah. Al-Baqillani, rahimahullah, is the first major personality of the Asha'ira. He's got 2 famous books, Al-Insaf and Tamheed al-Awail. And really in this phase, honestly, they say that Al-Baqillani was maybe the first one to start to change things. And it's said that Ibn Fawrak was the first one to change things. So some of them said that the first person to really, certainly the first person to be Ash'ari, like to have a proper Ash'ari, was Al-Baqillani. And maybe the first one to start to bring them that way was Ibn Fawrak. And we start to see the issue with regard to al-istiwa wal-ulu, the highness of Allah Azza wa Jal, and Allah's rising above His throne. This was never an issue before that. This was something that the early Asha'ira approved of, affirmed, that Allah is high above His creation. Like, and it started, and one of the first things that started was the discussion about al-ulu and al-istiwa, Allah's rising. There was also a discussion about al-kalam al-nafsi. They said Abu al-Hasan probably believed it because he was Kullabi, but Abu al-Hasan never in his second phase actually said so. There were people at that phase, you have to remember, there were people at that phase who, there were still some people upon the Kullabiyya. It wasn't, you can't just say Ibn Fawrak came and that's it, everything. Like Ibn Fawrak maybe started the ball rolling, moving the Asha'ira a little bit further down the road. So a little bit further down the road is openly saying about al-kalam al-nafsi, that the speech of Allah is only within himself. It is discussing al-ulu, Allah's highness, and saying that highness doesn't mean that he's actually high above his creation, and al-istiwa. Again, we pose the question, if it's the case, Asha'ira of today, that you don't affirm Allah's highness and you don't affirm Allah's rising over the throne, why did your Imam affirm them? Question to ask. So was Abu al-Hasan wrong? And this whole idea of the Salaf, and does that mean that until 450 years after the Hijrah, nobody actually knew where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was? Something to think about. The second phase is known as al-Ash'ariyah al-Mu'tazilah. And this is where the Asha'ira begin to agree with the Mu'tazilah, who, hold on a second, the Asha'ira are formed to refute the Mu'tazilah. In the second phase, the Asha'ira decide that actually the Mu'tazilah were ala haqq. And they leave the views of Ibn Kullab and start to embrace the views of the Mu'tazilah. In some of the matters. From those who were famous in this is the second major personality of the Asha'ira, and that is Abu al-Ma'ali al-Juwayni, Imam al-Haramain, who died 478 after the Hijrah. Al-Juwayni also repented from this, rahimahullah, and Al-Juwayni, who is the author of, you guys know, Al-Waraqat and fi usul al-fiqh. When you study the first book, you guys study in usul al-fiqh. Al-Juwayni is the author of that. He has his book, Kitab الإرشاد إلى قواطع الأدلة في أصول الاعتقاد الشامل في أصول الدين العقيدة النظامية في الأركان الإسلامية. Here is where we see one thing here. So far we haven't seen taqdeem al-aql ala al-naql, by the way. Have you noticed that? So far we've not seen anyone saying that the intellect takes precedence over the Quran. What we start to see now is the discussion about khabarul wahid, khabarul ahad. Who were the people who rejected khabarul ahad before that? Out of the groups, who do you think rejected the singular reports, the reports that are not narrated by many, many people? The punishment of the grave. The Mu'tazilah. For now, ajib, the Asha'ira who were defending Khabarul Wahid and refuting the Mu'tazilah from the time of Al-Juwayni, they start telling people that we don't take Khabarul Wahid in Aqeedah. We don't take the singular narrations and the ikhtilaf in masadir al-talaqqi. And they started to take more and more of the usul of the Mu'tazilah. We also see at this phase the beginning of describing Tawheed as Tawheed al-Rububiyyah, not Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah. This didn't exist prior to that. Didn't. There was none of this idea that La ilaha illallah means La Rabb wa La Khaliq illallah. For 450 years, La ilaha illallah meant La ma'buda bihaqqin illallah. There is no one deserving of worship except Allah. I say 450 approximately, 420, 450, 470. By that time, in the 400s, it's become there is no creator except Allah, there is no Lord except Allah. And there is no doubt that this is directly responsible for the shirk that we later see among the Sufiya. Bila shak. No one should have any doubt that the shirkiyat that we later see among the Sufiya, like the seeking the help of the people in the graves, wallahi, this is the key that opened it up. Because before that, people did not have any way of going to the saints and the awliya and praying at the graves, and they didn't, because for them, La ilaha illallah means La ma'buda bihaqqin illallah. As soon as they opened that door and they came to the people and said La ilaha illallah means La khaliqa illallah, what's the end result? The end result is that in time, these people were not doing it, but the end result is in time, you're going to see people standing by the side of the grave saying, Ya Abdul Qadir aghithni, oh Abdul Qadir, save me, and asking a Sayyid al-Badawi and asking al-Ghawth al-A'zam and all of that stuff they're going to start doing. Why? Because somebody opened the door for them by saying to them that you can still be a Muslim if you worship others besides Allah, as long as you believe that Allah is your Rabb. The beginning of hatred of the people of the Sunnah. That was not known before. Al-Baqillani, Al-Bayhaqi. This was not known before. This whole thing of people loved the Sunnah and defended the Sunnah and loved the people of the Sunnah. There was issues discussed, no doubt. But this idea of hatred of Ahl Sunnah and calling them Hashwiyah. They say Hashwiyah, yani you literally Hashwiyah means you stuffed Allah. Like how you would take a children's toy and you put stuffing in it. That's al-hashu. You would take a toy and you fill it with stuffing to make it. They say you people are Hashwiyah, yani you've made Allah like 3D shape. Wal-'iyadhu billah. What's the third phase? The third phase is al-Ashariyah al-Mutafalsifah. The Ash'ari philosophers. And this is now, forget ilm al-kalam, this is full on philosophy now. An agreement with the non-Muslim philosophers in the way that they reach their conclusions. And no doubt, the great personality in that is Abu Hamid al-Ghazali, who died 505 after the Hijrah. Al-Ghazali has his book, Al-Iqtisad fi al-I'tiqad, and also Ash-Shahrastani in Nihayat al-Iqdam fi Ilm al-Kalam, the author of Al-Milal wal-Nihal. And Fakhr al-Din al-Razi. And al-Razi is the fourth personality you need to know. So al-Ghazali is the third. Who is the first? Al-Baqillani, al-Juwayni, then al-Ghazali, and the fourth one is Fakhr al-Din al-Razi. And Fakhr al-Din al-Razi died 606 after the Hijrah. Rahimahullah. He made repentance and he tried to come back to the Sunnah. He has the book تأسيس التقديس الأربعين في أصول الدين محصل أفكار المتقدمين والمتأخرين. And in reality, you have to say that the real scholars of the Ash'ari, the real scholars of the Ash'ari, to be honest, the ones they really, really took from, was Al-Razi, Sayfuddin al-Amidi, who died 631 after the Hijrah, who has a book أبكار الأفكار في أصول الدين and غاية المرام في علم الكلام, and عضد الدين al-Iji, who died 756 after the Hijrah, who has the book Al-Mawaqif fi Ilm al-Kalam. These are the real scholars of the Ash'ari. Reality is the Ash'ari a long time ago left Abu al-Hasan, and they left even al-Baqillani, and they left behind al-Juwayni. They even left behind al-Ghazali to a certain extent. But the real scholars that they really now, like today, that are their scholars that they take their aqeedah from, are Fakhruddin al-Razi and Sayfuddin al-Amidi and Adl-ad-Din al-Iji. What are the dates for them? 606, 631 and 756. By the way, the book of al-Razi, Ta'sis al-Taqdis, Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah refuted it in Bayan Talbis al-Jahmiyyah. In his book, Bayan Talbis al-Jahmiyyah. Now we are into full-on philosophy. And we have the following things that clearly show what these people believe. Number one, turning away from the Quran and Sunnah and the aqwal of the Salaf. Actual hatred for the Quran, Sunnah and the aqwal of the Salaf. Yani speaking, turning away from it, speaking against it, telling the people that, for example, I will tell you, if you think that is an exaggeration, I will tell you what one of them said. He said, whoever takes from the apparent meaning of the Quran, this is disbelief. And he said, min usul al-kufr, from the foundations of disbelief is to take the apparent meaning of the Quran. Wal-iyadhu billah. Can you imagine that? From the usul of kufr is to take the apparent meaning of the Quran. If you take Ar-Rahman wa ala al-arsh istawa and you believe it, you're kafir. Hatred, i'rad, turning away from it. Taqdeem al-aqli ala al-naql, clearly saying, we're not talking about hiding it, saying that nobody puts the Quran first except a fool. Philosophy comes first, the intellect comes first, and the Quran and the Sunnah, فَنَبَذُوهُ وَرَاءَ ظُهُورِهِمْ, they threw it behind their back. Wallahi, I will say to you, I heard with these two ears Hamza Yusuf al-Maturidi, that da'iyah in America. Wallahi, I heard with these two ears that he called the people who take the Quran and the Sunnah knuckleheads. And they like insulting people who take the Quran and the Sunnah. But he's not, هذا ليس بغريب. هو على المذهب. He is upon the madhab of the mutaakhirin of the Ash'ari and the Maturidiyya, which is al-i'rad al-tam an al-kitab wa sunnah. Completely turning away from the kitab and the sunnah. What would al-Baqillani, what would Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari, what would Ibn Kullab say if they saw them? Wallahi, they would declare themselves free of these people. And it's utterly unfair to claim that Abu al-Hasan or that Ibn Kullab were upon what these people are upon. Taqdeem al-aql ala al-naql. Tasrih. Not the others, maybe sahih. It's true, al-Ghazali, it's true, maybe you can even say al-Juwayni. There's a bit of it like the aqliyat, and if you don't know these principles, you're a kafir, and you have to understand the philosophy. But to come and say that reasoning has precedence over the Quran, this is the mutaakhirin of the Ash'ari. And what happened what did Al-Ghazali give us? Al-Ghazali left behind the legacy of Sufism. And so Sufism comes in with Al-Ghazali, and after that Ash'ari, Maturidi, the mutaakhirin from them, and the Sufis are permanently married. Always together. You don't get one without the other. After Al-Ghazali put them together. To be fair to Al-Ghazali, in a way, he kind of left the Ash'ari bit. He put them together, then he left the Ash'ari bit and he said, you know, I should repent and this is wrong and everything. And then he kind of left you with the Sufi bit. But that's it. Once Al-Ghazali put them together, and now we have something clear. Defense of shirk and grave worship. Defense of shirk and grave worship. This comes here in the mutaakhirin from them, who start to use this defense. Wallahi, we're talking 600 to 700 years after the hijrah. What was it? It was haram before that, but at 600 years, which angel came down and made it halal for you? And did Jibreel visit you to tell you suddenly it became halal? For 600 years, your own a'imma would have never dreamed of justifying shirk. Like after Al-Ghazali put that Sufism in there and the Sufis did the thing that they do. Remember, some of them were extreme Sufis like the Batiniya, the belief that yes, there is one. I'll read it to you. You'll, wallahi, you will be. And sometimes you're going to look and just say, what is this? And the belief that there's one man in Makkah who secretly controls the world, and there's one in the north and one in the east and one in the west and one in the south, and then each of those has a guy on his right and a guy on his left, and the guy on the left is controlling the apparent, and the guy on the left controls the hidden, and the guy on the right controls the apparent or something. And then the 40 aqtab, the 40 qutubs, and it's all Sufi silliness that they had. This became permanently married to the Ash'ari Aqidah. That's why now you have Ash'ari Sufi. The Maturidiyya came at the same time, and I would have wished to have spent more time with the Maturidiyya, but reality is the Maturidiyya are extremely close to the Ash'a'ira, except that the madhab of the Ash'a'ira is Shafi'i, and the madhab of the Maturidiyya is Hanafi. So if you find a Hanafi Ash'ari, he's Maturidi, and you find a Shafi'i Ash'ari, he's Ash'ari, but the belief is very similar. The Maturidi added one sifa, 7, they went to 8. They went from 7 to 8. And there's ijma' of the Ash'a'ira and the Maturidiyya that the two madahib are both acceptable to them. And I don't know of any khilaf among them, especially today. They are upon the belief that Ash'a'ira and Maturidiyya, both of them are acceptable beliefs, and both of them are from Ahl Sunnah according to them. The one who said, min usul al-kufri al-akhd bi-dhawahir al-nusus, from the fundamental things that causes you kufr is to take what the Quran and Sunnah says. This is the statement of Muhammad ibn Yusuf Sanusi, if I'm not mistaken, 895 after the Hijrah. In reality, I'm going to tell you something which I think a lot of people don't actually think of a lot. Before we go on to Sufi in the last 20 minutes, a lot of people don't realize this. This discussion is not just in the Asma wa Sifat. In fact, there are 7 major areas of Aqeedah in which we differ from these people. The first is Masdar al-Talaqqi. That's the greatest difference we have with them to begin with, which is where do we take our religion from. For Ahl Sunnah say we take it from the Quran and the Sunnah and the Salaf of the Ummah, and they say we take it from Al-Aql and the principles of philosophy and And then, only then, we go to the Quran and the Sunnah after that. The second major difference, أول واجب على المكلف. What's the first thing that a person has to do? The third major difference, Tawheed. Because remember, the mutaakhirin from them are upon the justification of grave worship and tawassul and all of the things that you see from the Sufiya today. They're all upon that, from the mutaakhirin of them. The fourth major difference is Iman, the concept of Iman. So in Iman, they are Murji'ah, and they believe that actions are not a part of Iman. The fifth major difference is in Qadr. The fifth major difference is in Qadr, where they are Jabriyah. They're from the Jabriyah. The sixth major difference is in Nubuwat, issues relating to prophethood. So the issues of al-mu'jizat, miracles, and the issues of the fact that they believe the sending of prophets does not have a wisdom. There isn't a hikmah in the sending of the prophets. Why? Because it's a technical point that they don't believe you can attribute a hikmah to Allah in something that happens from time to time, because that would mean that the hikmah of Allah is new and that it's been acquired and it's been created and all of that. The Quran is the speech of Allah. What do the Asha'ira say about the Quran? They say it is kalamullah makhluqun bi'tibar wa ghayru makhluqin bi'tibar. That's qawl al-Asha'ira. If they're happy with me saying it or not happy, that's their qawl. And that is that they say the Quran is the speech of Allah. It is created in one way and not created in another way. طيب, which bit of it is not created? It's easy for you to answer, you know now. Which bit is not created? Al-kalam al-nafsi. The speech which is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is a constant, which never... And the Quran is a representation of that, which is created for them. For the words of the Quran to them are created, and the order is created, and all of it is created to them except al-kalam al-nafsi. But they don't like the people to hear this. And that's why I have also heard Hamza Yusuf, al-Maturidi, and he speak about this. And he brought his sheikh from, I think, Mauritania, to teach the people Aqidah. And the sheikh told them, Al-Quran makhluqun bi'tibar wa ghayr makhluq bi'tibar akhar. The Quran is created and not created. And he kind of said, Sheikh, stop, don't teach this to the people. And then he came in front of the people and he apologized and he said that, look, we don't teach this belief to the regular people, because if you say to the regular, I'm going to quote his words, if you say this to a regular person, you might get punched. That's what he said. And that's the truth. They know that the regular people can't stomach this Jahmi sickness that they have, which is nothing other than the belief of the Jahmiyyah. And they know the regular people can't stomach it, so they don't teach it to them. They say the Quran is kalamullah. They just read al-Aqidah Tahawiyah, the Quran is the kalam of Allah, and they stop. Lakin ask them, say this here in Surah Al-Baqarah, Alif Lam Mim, ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ, kalamullah or not? Let them answer. They don't believe it's the kalam of Allah Azza wa Jal. They believe it's a representation or an interpretation or a translation or a ibara or hikaya or whatever you want to call it. They've got differences between them about what they believe about it, but they believe it is a representation of that kalam which is with Allah Azza wa Jal, and it's makhluq to them. And as we said, the Maturidiyya, they go back to Abu Mansur Muhammad ibn Muhammad al-Maturidi al-Samarqandi. Abu Mansur Muhammad ibn Muhammad al-Maturidi al-Samarqandi, who died 333 after the Hijrah. And by the time of Fakhruddin al-Razi, they do have some differences between them, but by the time of Fakhruddin al-Razi in 606 after the Hijrah he died, Fakhruddin considered them to be a full part of the Ash'ari. Yani they and us, there's no difference between us. And the difference is primarily an issue of madhab fiqhi. But they have differences. I went in AMAU through, they have many differences, like small differences in Aqidah, but they say that these differences are very small differences between us, and we don't make al-wala wal-bara upon it. There's one more group we need to know about before we talk about the Sufiya, and that is the Mufawwidah. And this is a subset of the Asha'ira and the Maturidiyah. And what they speak about is tafweed al-ma'na al-murad min al-nassi al-muhim lit-tashbih. This is important. And we only have 1-2 minutes to do it, 5 minutes max, so think about it carefully. They take the view of tafweed al-ma'na al-murad min al-nassi al-muhim lit-tashbih. So any text that they think would mean resembling Allah to His creation, what's the mainstream view of the Asha'ira in that text? A tahrif or a ta'wil. So what they're going to do is reinterpret. They say istiwa means istawla. Rose above the throne means conquered the throne. Question, who did Allah conquer His throne from? And why did Allah not say istawla if He meant istawla? Why did He say istawa and not istawla? Ala kulli hal. They changed istawa to istawla. Rose to conquered. يحرفون الكلمة عن مواضعه. They took the words of the Quran away from the meaning that it was given. However, the Mufawwidah, they didn't. The Mufawwidah said, every time we come to a text like this, we say nobody knows the meaning except Allah. And that is why the reality is the tawbah of those Imams that we mentioned, Fakhruddin al-Razi, and the tawbah of al-Ghazali, and the tawbah of al-Juwayni, and to a certain extent, although maybe it's a bit harsh on Abu al-Hasan, a certain extent the tawbah of Abu al-Hasan is not a tawbah to the aqeedah of Ahl Sunnah. But what it is actually leaving behind a ta'wil and embracing a tafweed. Why? Because these people actually think that this is madhab al-salaf. So the standard belief among the Asha'ira is that the madhab of the Asha'ira is a new madhab. They actually agree with that, and they textually state that our madhab has been invented after the Sahaba. We believe that firmly. So they actually don't deny. The mainstream Asha'ira do not deny that their madhab is a madhab that is muhdath. So when you say to them, Tayyib, your madhab just turned up with a little help from Jahm ibn Safwan, what was before? They say, I've got an answer. Muhammad Tim, we know what was before. We know what was before was the belief of the Salaf. We say, Alhamdulillah, it was. What was the belief of the Salaf? They say, tafweed. The belief of the Salaf was to say, we don't know what it means. Now there's a fundamental contradiction in this. Because these two madahib are not compatible. Both of them are a batil. In fact, Shaykh al-Islam said tafweed is worse than ta'wil. Because it entails that the Quran is meaningless. The Quran came with no meaning. Ayatul Kursi from the beginning to the end, to them, is like you're reading some foreign language. It's like you're reading Chinese or something. You don't know what those words mean. Allahu la ilaha illa huwa al-hayyul qayyum. Allahu a'lam. لا تأخذه سنة ولا نوم الله أعلم. له ما في السماوات وما في الأرض الله أعلم. And it's just, how can you say the Quran came down with Allahu A'lam? It's worse. Like, the reality is, they really believe that that's what the Sahaba did. And the two are not compatible. Like, they made it compatible because their Imams keep leaving them and going to Tafweed. So Abu al-Hasan left them. Abu al-Hasan was better, but he left them. Al-Juwayni left them. Al-Ghazali left them. And Fakhr ad-Din al-Razi left them. So to combat this exodus of Imams, which they have a problem with, that their Imams keep on leaving them, they came up with a solution. It's simple. We're just going to say that both of them are fine. It's absolutely fine to say that istawa means istawla, and it's absolutely fine to say no one knows the meaning except Allah. Does nobody, these are people of aql. These are people from the most intelligent people, and very sharp, very geniuses of the ummah in terms of their raw intellect. Does nobody see the contradiction in this? Can nobody see that these two things are not compatible? If either you say no one knows except Allah, or you say it means istawla, which one is it? You can't have both. How can you have both? How can anybody possibly say that it's okay to say istawa means conquered, and it's okay to say nobody knows the meaning except Allah? So does someone know the meaning, or someone doesn't know the meaning? But what you will see is that Asha'ira, when you lock them down, which is not very difficult, they run away, and they run away and hide in where? In Tafweed. And that is why some of them said something which is, to be honest, from the most foolish things that I think a person could have said. They said, طريقة السلف أسلم وطريقة الخلف أحكم. They said the way of the Salaf is safer. What's the way of the Salaf for them? Tafweed. And they say the way of the Khalaf is more ahkam, it's more precise, it's more detailed, it's more solid. I don't know where to start with that. I don't think you need to make a commentary. I think you can just put that on a line and say, that's my rad alaykum. طريقة السلف أسلم وطريقة الخلف أحكم. I don't know what to even say to that. Not only that, but that's not even طريقة السلف. And we'll just give you one evidence, or the evidences are many. I'm going to give you two evidences. I'm going to give you one evidence from the statement of Imam Malik. What did he say? Al-istiwa'u ghayru majhul, wal-kayfu ghayru ma'qul, wal-imanu bihi wajib, was-su'alu anhu bid'ah. He affirmed the meaning of istiwa. He said, I know what istiwa means. You know what istiwa means. We know what the word means. The word came in Arabic. Inna anzalnahu Qur'anan Arabiyyan la'allakum ta'qilun. That ayah is enough to refute the Mufawwidah. Just that ayah by itself refutes them. Inna anzalnahu Qur'anan Arabiyyan la'allakum ta'qilun. We sent it down as an Arabic Qur'an so that you may be able to understand it with your mind. How can you say that a third of the Qur'an can't be understood? The Arabic is unknown what it means. The word, they actually said, it is the same as Alif Lam Mim. Yani they said that Ar-Rahmanu ala al-Arsh istawa equals Alif Lam Mim. No one knows what it means. How can that be compatible with Inna anzalnahu Qur'anan Arabiyyan la'allakum ta'qilun? Thumma, the statements of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud and Abdullah ibn Abbas, that they know the tafsir of every ayah of the Qur'an. Were they telling the truth, or they weren't telling the truth about it? If we say that they were telling the truth about it, the Mufawwidah, their beliefs just fell down, because you just told us that a third of the Qur'an cannot be understood by anybody. Rather, some of them said the Prophet ﷺ didn't understand it. The Prophet ﷺ didn't know what it meant. He just passed it on. But this is a worse opinion than the opinion of the first one. That's what they believed is tariqatul salaf. They believed that's what the salaf were upon, wal-iyadhu billah. Ikhwani, very, very, very quickly, and not actually, we don't really have time, but just 5 minutes before the salah, insha'Allah ta'ala, we're going to talk very, very, very briefly about the Sufiya. In the beginning, the Sufiya, and it seems there's a difference of opinion about what the word comes from, but it seems that as-Sufiya was a attribution to the wearing of wool. That's what it seems to be the correct view. It was said, هذا الاسم لم يكن في زمن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم، وقيل كان في زمن التابعين، ثم نقل عن الحسن البصري، وما تقدم عن الطوسي أيضا، ثم قال قيل لم يعرف هذا الاسم إلا 200 من الهجرة العربية. يعني لم يعرف هذا الاسم إلى 200 من الهجرة العربية. And for 200 years there was nothing known as Sufism, even though the Sufis have put each of the Sahaba in a tariqah and everybody gets their own tariqah, but it wasn't known. Al-Qushayri said اشتهر هذا الاسم لهؤلاء الأكابر قبل 200 من الهجرة. And around 200 years after the hijrah, the name started to come out, and the name was used for a group of the Zuhad, a group of the people of Zuhd. And some of them said 150 after the hijrah, some said 189 after the hijrah, some said 200 after the hijrah, 210 after the hijrah. Lakin they said this: in the beginning it began as a Zuhd in Al-Basra and elsewhere. The first phase of the Sufiya was the issue of worship, being far away from the people, keeping far away from the dunya, leaving off of marriage, leaving off of wealth, living a simple life, wearing rough clothes. And this was the first phase of the Sufiya. And they're sometimes called, for a word of a contradiction, Sufiyatu Ahl al-Hadith. They're called Sufiyatu Ahl al-Hadith, the Sufiya of the people of Hadith. After that, they began to speak about about al-mukashafat wal-ilhamat, any feeling like we have been inspired to do some things, feelings have come to us, inspiration has come to us, the matter has been opened to our eyes. And here they began to speak about al-zahir wal-batin. They began to speak about ilm al-zahir and ilm al-batin, the knowledge of that which is apparent and the knowledge of that which is hidden. Where did that knowledge originally come from? We said from the Shia. The Shia were the people who really started this. There's a hidden meaning because they were trying to excuse why the Quran doesn't have Imama in it, and it doesn't have Ali in it, and it doesn't have... So they were trying to get out of that. So some of them started this idea that the Quran has a hidden, secret meaning that nobody knows except our Imams, and the Sufiya took that on in their second phase. In time of this phase, like Abil Hasan al-Shadhili, Ahmad al-Rifa'i, and that which is attributed to. And this is, by the way, the Sufiya have this thing. The Sufiya have something that you need to bear in mind, very important with regard to Sufiya, is that they consider lying, if it's done for a good reason, to be permissible. Not the early Sufiyat Ahl Hadith, but the Sufiya after that. So you do see them fabricating hadith to make people come to the Quran, and you also see them fabricating things about shuyukh, like Abdul Qadir al-Jailani, rahimahullah ta'ala, who's not upon their aqidah, but they bring this thing upon them. And the second phase is the beginning of al-bid'ah and al-shirkiyat. Then comes the third phase, and that is as-Sufiyya al-mutafalsifa, the philosophical Sufiyya. And this is where the falsafa of Greek philosophy, and Sufiyya come together in the time of the likes of that which is started by Al-Ghazali and was carried on from them. And this is particularly known by the likes of those people who went to extremes from the ghulat of the Sufiyya in this phase, like Ibn Arabi. And not Ibn al-Arabi al-Maliki, but Ibn Arabi al-Zindiq, the heretic. They have all sorts of mustalahat. This issue of the 40 people and all of that, we don't really have time for it. We have explained it on the AMAU channel, walillah alhamd, with all of their mustalahat and what they talk about, al-kashf and the issue of al-ghayba. When they go into a mode of insanity, and in that mode of insanity they kind of do strange things and see strange things, and then they come back to themselves. And the terminology of the Sufiyya in this, we explained all of it and what it is. We also spoke about the statements of the Salaf with regard to them. From them is the statement of Ash-Shafi'i, who saw only the beginning of the Sufiyya. He said, لو أن رجلا تصوف أول النهار لا يأتي الظهر حتى يصير أحمق. He said, if a man takes to Sufiyya in the beginning of the day, Dhuhr will not come before he became a fool. And he also said, ما لزم أحد الصوفيين 40 يوما فعاد عقله أبدا. He said, nobody accompanies the Sufis for 40 days except that he'll never get his brain back. He'll never get his aql back. And there are other statements with regard to A'immat ad-Din. And if you look at Ibn al-Jawzi in his book Talbis Iblis, he has a lot of discussion about the danger of the Sufiyya and how the shaitan overcame them and their embracing of sihr and all of those type of things. Wallah, I wish we could do more. And we didn't get a chance to speak about them in a lot of detail. The firaq are many. So we didn't take a lot. I don't think that we took a lot of the firaq or the history. We didn't speak about the Batiniyya much. We didn't speak about the modern groups. But you've taken, inshallah, enough that you now have in front of you two options. The first is you could suffice yourself with what you've taken, inshallah ta'ala, which is good. And you can see when a modern group comes up, they took a bit from here, a bit from here, a bit from here, and you can see where that came from. Likewise, I hope you gained a strong appreciation for the Sunnah and for its people and for the blessing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us of making us people who want, I don't say we do, people who want to follow the Sunnah, the Quran and the Sunnah and what the early generation of Muslims were upon. The other option you have, for sure, if you wish, is for those of you who wish to go on to AMAU, the AMAU Academy. If you go to Al-Madkhal ila al-Firaqi wal-Iftiraq, you actually find this was kind of a summary of that. With a bit extra, I added some points in from historical points in. But actually what you find is a lot more detail there. Because AMAU doesn't have a time limit, so we went into it in detail. We spoke about all the sects that came off and the ones that came off them and the ones that came off them. And it was a long set of lessons. So if you want more information, even about a particular group, you can go there to the AMAU Academy, the AMAU app. And on there, you can go to the Aqeedah section of the Student of Knowledge program. And you can go to Al-Madkhal ila al-Firaqi wal-Iftiraq, the introduction to sects and sectarianism. And you can go to the firqa that you're interested in learning about, and you could actually get details about them. If specifically you want more details about the Asha'ira, I think from the best thing is that Ustadh Abdurrahman has a podcast that he did. I think it came like few hours, maybe like 5 hours or something, 4 hours or something. It was a good long podcast about the Asha'ira. There's more detail in there. This point we made is just some summaries about it. I also hope that the goal of this was not for you to insult people or just to say, you are like this or you are like that. Like, to understand. Like, now I hope that you will see among the Sufiya of today, you'll see the influence of the Asha'ira and the Maturidiyya. You'll see the influence of the Shia. You'll see the influence of the Batiniyya upon them. And you'll see, and I hope also some of the modern issues like the shubuhat that were brought by the likes of Hatim al-Awni and people like that around the meaning of ibadah. In reality, this is just a repackaging of what happened in the likes of the time of those later Asha'ira. Because they now start to justify shirkiyat, and there's no difference in that. But I hope that when you see these modern day shubahat, you can actually link them to some of the shubahat of the past. So instead of falling over and saying, oh, I've never heard of this, how will we answer it? He's saying things about the meaning of La ilaha illallah, and he's saying we don't understand ibadah. I hope you'll actually see that and actually feel like, no, that's not the case. And actually you'll feel like I can handle this. Because actually it's just a repackaging of the same thing that was said by the mutaakhirin of the later scholars of the Asha'ira, who started to justify shirkiyat through a reinterpretation of the meaning of La ilaha illallah. And I hope honestly that if you leave with anything, you leave with the concept that the correct al-firqatun najiyah wa ta'ifatul mansura is not the ta'ifa, it's not Muhammad Tim, and it's not Shaykh Hudayfa, and it's not the shuyukh that have spoken to you. Al-firqatun najiyah is what Allah said in the Quran, and what the Prophet ﷺ said in his sunnah, and what the Sahaba conveyed to us, and what the A'imma, the Imams of this Ummah came upon. And wallahi, the Imams of this Ummah, the Imams of Ahlul Hadith, and the Imams of Fiqh in this Ummah, not one of them was Ash'ari or Maturidi or Mu'tazili or Jahmi or Shi'i or Qadari or Jabari or any other of these names and labels. Every single one of them was ala aqidat as-salaf. With, not to say that people don't make mistakes, we spoke about little things here and there. Like in the Imams of Islam, the Immat of Hadith, the Imma of Al-Jarh wa-Ta'dil, the Imma of Ahl Hadith, the Imma of Fiqh, all of them were ala aqidat as-salaf. Not aqidat al-tafweed, but the real aqidah of the salaf. In all of the abwab of Iman. If that in itself is a benefit to take home. Ikhwani, I want to ask your forgiveness that due to a train that is going to leave in like 25 minutes, inshallah ta'ala, I really want to just pray and quickly go, inshallah ta'ala. So I won't have time for salam and discussion with you, inshallah, but I would love to do that another time, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. That is what Allah Azza wa Jalla made easy for me to mention. I'd like to thank all of the organizers of the conference, the Idara of the Masjid, Shaykh Hudayfa, and all of the individuals that were involved in supporting us and facilitating this conference. We ask Allah Azza wa Jalla to place it heavy on the scale of their good deeds Yawm al-Qiyamah. That is what Allah Azza wa Jalla made easy for me to mention. Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. Wassalatu wassalamu ala nabina Muhammad.